Hello everyone. The purpose of this video is to take a look at sentence patterns 1 and 2. Before we do that, we're going to have to look at some basic information that will help us understand how to put sentences together. Now, I have to think that there's nothing that I'm going to say in this video that you haven't heard lots of times. I'm going to make my best effort at trying to break it down in a way that it might make more sense to you. The first thing we're going to look at is what I call the rank of punctuation as used in sentences, the strength of punctuation marks that we use when we build sentences. Punctuation serves as traffic signs in the written word. Punctuation helps us understand the message. When we use verbal communication, when we use the spoken word, we can add pauses, we can add voice inflections, we can add body language that helps the receiver understand our message. We lose all of that in the written word. So punctuation is our best effort at helping the reader understand the message. So if we string a group of words together, the way we punctuate them will help the reader understand what the writer is trying to say. So for example, we might string the words together, woman without her man is useless. Or we might string them together with some punctuation which would change the meaning of the sentence to woman without her man is useless. So you see how I did that with my voice inflection. Punctuation gives you that same ability to understand a written message. End punctuation marks have the greatest strength. So end punctuation marks are periods, question marks, and exclamations. They stop a sentence and tell the reader, okay, I'm finished with this sentence. I'm going to move on to another sentence. So they have the greatest amount of strength. A semicolon has the second greatest strength. It can join sentences with no assistance, and I'll talk about assistance in a minute. A lot of people are afraid to use semicolons because they don't really think they know how to use them. But semicolons are easy to use, and semicolons can replace end punctuation marks by joining two sentences together without any assistance. Where we then look at the comma. Now the comma is the weakest of the punctuation when it comes to joining sentences because it can't serve the role of a semicolon. It can't join two independent clauses, two complete sentences without assistance. And the assistance comes with coordinating conjunctions, and we'll talk about those in a minute. But if you try to join two complete sentences with just a comma, your teacher may have written on your paper, comma splice, which means the comma is not strong enough to join two complete sentences, never mind more than two. If we look here now, we're going to look at the definition of an independent clause. When we say the word independent, it says to us immediately doesn't need assistance. So if someone is independent, they're not depending on assistance. So an independent clause is a complete sentence. It's a group of words which has to have a subject and a verb at a minimum. I'm sure you already know this, but the subject is the person, the place, the thing that is doing something or is being something. It defines what the sentence is about or who or what is performing an action. So the subject is the person, place, or thing that is either doing something in the sentence or being something. So the doing, you might be running, you might be jumping, you might be any of those sorts of things. Being, you might be happy, you might be sad, you might be falling asleep. So the subject is what the sentence is about. A verb shows action or it shows a state of being. So if the subject is doing something, running, jumping, the verb will show action, run, jump. If the subject is being something, these are the only state of being verbs in the English language. So I am happy, I was sad, that sort of thing. So subject and verb. An independent clause has to have both of those things. And as I said, an independent clause can stand alone. It's a complete sentence. The independent clause must have at least one subject, one verb. So this has students as the subject. It has a helping verb. Write is the verb. So subject, right, helping verb, verb. An independent clause can have two subjects and one verb. So teacher, students, two subjects, and then the rest of the sentence. Or it can have one subject and two verbs. So one subject, write well, enjoy reading. Two verbs. But an independent clause cannot have two subjects and two verbs. If we have two subjects and two verbs, then we have two independent clauses, two sentences. And an independent clause might have an introductory word or introductory phrase to sort of decorate it. Now, when you have been taught essay writing, you have been taught to decorate your sentences with introductory words and phrases. Now, the difference between a phrase and a clause is that a phrase is a group of words that doesn't have a subject and a verb. So an example of an introductory phrase to kind of add something to a sentence, to an independent clause, in my creative writing class, and it will always have a comma at the end. If it's a single word or if it's an introductory phrase, it will have a comma at the end of the introductory word or the introductory phrase. All right. This is some basic information that now leads us into the sentence patterns, sentence structures. Now, there's nothing here that you haven't already learned. And as I say some of these words and descriptions, the back of your brain is going to say, oh yes, I remember hearing that. And some of you know how to do this, and this will be simply a review for you. So we will look first at sentence pattern number one. Sentence pattern number one is a simple sentence. It's one independent clause. So business writing is a valuable skill. All right. One simple sentence. And you could write hundreds of them. Could you write everything in simple sentences and never go beyond that? You could, and you did when you were in second grade and you got a A+ at the top of your paper and some kind of a sticker, and the teacher said, great job. Everything was an independent clause. I went to camp. I had fun. I learned to swim. I played tennis. And again, the teacher said, great job. Your parents were sure they had raised a genius. But as you progress beyond elementary school and you continue to write with only independent clauses, then things are not going to go as well for you. Your writing will not be considered high level and professional. Now, that's not to say that you'll never use any single independent clauses, simple sentences. You will. But primarily, you'll hook them together and put other pieces with them. Even just adding a decoration at the front will help to kick them up a notch from just a simple independent clause. All right, and the last sentence pattern that we're going to look at in this video is sentence pattern 2. Sentence pattern 2 has several renditions, but first of all, the definition of sentence pattern 2 is It's a compound sentence. Compound means more than one, it means two. We put two words together to make a compound word. So sentence pattern 2 consists of two independent clauses and no dependent clauses. We haven't talked about dependent clauses yet. We'll do that in the next video. A sentence should not include more than two independent clauses. Now, it may contain a dependent clause as we move along, but when you get into trouble is when you start hitching 3, 4 independent clauses together into one sentence. You can't punctuate a sentence like that. You can't punctuate it. It is a rambling sentence that the reader can't understand well. The reader gets tired of reading it because it is hard to understand. So make it a point. Don't put more than two independent clauses in one sentence. The most common way that we put independent clauses together into a sentence is to start with an independent clause, put a comma, add a coordinating conjunction, and end with an independent clause. Now remember, I told you that if we don't put this coordinating conjunction in and just put the comma, then we have got a comma splice and it's not a correct sentence. So if we look here, business writing is a valuable skill, comma, and coordinating conjunction. It can be learned with practice. Now what happens a lot of times is that people leave this conjunction out and say business writing is a valuable skill, comma, it can be learned with practice. That is a significant writing error. People who write reasonably well and very well will notice that, so don't do it. Sometimes you'll see this sentence written without the comma. That is a less awful error. If you're going to choose one error to make in your sentence patterns, choose this one. It is more correct to put the comma in. So practice putting the comma in, and you don't forget the comma. That's not where your problem lies. You forget the coordinating conjunction. In the English language, there are 7 coordinating conjunctions, and you learned them, I'm sure, at some point with the Fanboys acronym. So here is the list of them. These are the 7 words in the English language that can serve in this role in sentence pattern 2A. Independent clause, comma, coordinating conjunction, one of these words, independent clause. And obviously you'll select one of these words based on the meaning of the sentence. Let's look at sentence pattern 2B. Sentence pattern 2B uses the semicolon. Now remember, we said semicolon is strong enough that it doesn't need any assistance. So we're going to select 2 independent clauses that are very closely related to us. And by the letter of the law, they shouldn't have any decorations. So a straight independent clause, another independent clause that are closely related, change the comma to a semicolon, and get rid of the coordinating conjunction. The semicolon is strong enough to stand by itself without the conjunction, so eliminate the conjunction. Now, the way you'll know that you have this right is you could replace this with a period and you'd have 2 complete sentences. If we come up here, you could replace the comma and the and with a period, new capital letter, you'd have 2 complete sentences. If you don't have 2 complete sentences, if you don't have that second subject, then you have got an independent clause with 2 subjects. So be careful with 2 verbs and 1 subject. So be sure that you've got 2 complete sentences when you try to hitch them together. Now sentence pattern number 3 is just my personal favorite. It is such a nice sentence pattern and it is so easy to write. If you write this sentence pattern, some people who read your writing won't pay any attention to it, but really good writers will pay attention to this and go, ah, that is a nice sentence pattern. And that's kind of the reaction you want to get once in a while. So you still got your 2 independent clauses. You're still there. And you're going to use a semicolon, which kind of kicks things up a notch anytime you're able to do that. So you're going to say independent clause, semicolon, then you're going to use a transitional expression. Now you know what these are, you just may never have heard them called this. Sometimes they're called independent markers as well, but they're more commonly called transitional expression. That makes a lot more sense because that's what they are, transitioning you from one thought to another. So here we're using the independent marker or transitional expression, fortunately. Business writing is a valuable skill, semicolon, fortunately, comma, it can be learned with practice. Now, how can you just possibly ever have a nicer sentence pattern with that than that? And it's so easy to write. And when we come down here, we'll see this is a list of some examples of transitional expressions. These are not the only ones, but this is an example of ones that you might use. Now, if you throw a thus in there in your sentence pattern 2C, that'll kick it up even another notch, or whereas. So again, this is an easy sentence pattern that kicks in a semicolon and this nice transition and the second part of your sentence. Now, don't try to do this if you unless you have two crystal clear, clean, independent clauses that are closely related to each other. You can't hitch together two independent clauses that aren't related to each other, and you can't hitch together two independent clauses that have got some other kind of decoration in them, like an introductory word or phrase. So it's a great sentence pattern. Give it a try, and you'll impress some of the people who read your writing. You'll impress the people you want to impress. So hopefully this has been useful for you, and we'll look at sentence patterns 3 and 4 in the next video.